Chapter 14. Information. On Friday morning, Clare woke surprisingly early, and with a huge appetite. She got out of bed immediately and tested her body. A bit stiff in the top half of the legs, but not bad really. And no headache from last night's drinking. Good, must be the clean air. She helped herself to breakfast in the dining room and thought about last night. She'd had a good time, but wondered if she'd made a fool of herself. A handsome ski teacher invites woman on her own for a drink. It was a bit of a cliché. Oh well, we'll see later on, she thought, after I've been to the police station. Herr Ziegler received her in his office and said that the post-mortem results had shown that the body was that of her grandfather, Edward Crowe. "Would it be possible for me to see him?" asked Clare. Herr Ziegler looked surprised.
"I do not think it is a very good idea, madame. You know, after 70 years under the ice, it is not in good condition. He is very dried up, I'm sorry to say."
"Oh, yes, of course," said Clare. "I wasn't thinking."
"We found a wallet in the pocket of his jacket."
Herr Ziegler opened a drawer in his desk and brought out a plastic envelope in which there was a dark-looking object.
"His name was on the inside of the wallet, and there was also a photograph."
He handed it to her, and she gasped. It was a photograph of her mother, aged about 3. She recognized it immediately because it was the same one that she had in her house in London.
"You know this person?"
asked Herr Ziegler. "Yes, it's my mother," said Clare, a bit shakily. "Can I keep these things?" she asked.
"Yes, we have finished with them now," replied Herr Ziegler, "but I must ask you to sign this paper to say that they have been given to you. Could you please write your name just here?"
Herr Ziegler pointed to a space on the paper, and Clare signed.
"We have done everything we need, Madame Newton. We will arrange for your grandfather's body to be transported to Geneva Airport with all the correct paperwork. Would it be all right for you to fly back to England on Monday or Tuesday?"
"Yes, that's fine. I'll go back to my hotel and make all the arrangements," said Clare. "Oh, by the way, I took up your suggestion of going to the Alpine Museum. It's a very interesting place. A bit sad in some ways, all those young lives lost."
"Yes, but they died doing something that they loved, I believe."
"True," said Clare. "Anyway, unfortunately, I was not able to get any more information from the museum about how my grandfather died. There was no record of the climb there. Nobody seems to know who he was climbing with or anything."
"That is a pity. But I am surprised they did not know his climbing partner. I have heard that he was climbing with another Englishman who also died. His name was Gordon Young, I believe."
"Gordon Younger, you mean?" asked Clare excitedly.
Yes, Gordon Younger, that is right. He—"
"Herr Ziegler," Clare interrupted, "how do you know that he was with Gordon Younger?"
"It is just something that everybody has always said. Mr. Crowe and Mr. Younger were together. They both died, but Mr. Younger's body was brought down. He is buried in the cemetery. But the rescue people couldn't reach your grandfather. This is the story that is believed in the village."
"And do you know the name of the guide they were climbing with? Was it Ulrich Grunwalder?" asked Clare.
"That I do not know," said Herr Ziegler.
"Well, thank you for the information," said Clare. She stood up to leave. "I'll ring you later this morning about which flight I'll take next week. Goodbye, and thank you again." Clare left the police station feeling confused. The photograph of her mother, which had lain in Edward Crowe's wallet for all those years, made him more of a real person to her. He had so obviously cared about the little daughter he had left behind. How sad that he would never see her again. In her mind, Clare saw him as an adventurous, rather romantic man who was searching for something. But maybe she was wrong. Maybe he was a selfish individual who had destroyed his family. She wanted answers to her questions. She wanted a more complete picture of her grandfather. And now she had one answer, the name of his climbing companion. It was strange that no one had been able to tell her this before. She'd certainly asked the right questions of the right people. It almost seemed as if some people didn't want her to know. But why? She couldn't see any reason for it being a secret. It all happened so long ago. Back at the hotel, she confirmed her flight home for Monday and then made herself ring Kevin. She had to let him know she was going to write the story. "Hi, babe," said Kevin. "I was just going to ring you. What news?" "Kevin, do you call me babe to annoy me? Because you certainly succeed," asked Clare. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," laughed Kevin. "Look, I need something from you for tomorrow's paper. Otherwise the story'll go cold." "OK, babe," Clare replied sharply, but then realised that Kevin would probably like being called that. He'd think it made him young and sexy. Some hope. "The story is that Grandfather is coming home on Monday on Swissair Flight 354, landing Heathrow at 3 in the afternoon." "Right. We'll get a photographer there," said Kevin. "Anything else? I need something more personal, more special, more intimate. You're his granddaughter. You can give me a bit more." Clare told him about the photograph of her mother found on Edward's body, and also that he'd been climbing with another Englishman who'd also died. "Look, I think we should just run a short article tomorrow and save the full story for next Tuesday," said Clare. "I'll email through something for tomorrow as soon as I put the phone down." "OK, I'll go with that. And next week's article will be full page with lots of detail about the accident, how your mother feels, etc." "Have you talked to the family of the man he was climbing with? That might be another side to the story." "And what about—" Clare interrupted him. "Stop trying to teach me my job. I'll write the article the way I want. But you'll have it in time for the Tuesday paper, and it'll be good." "It had better be," replied Kevin. "By the way, have you come across any other journalists out there?" "No, why?" asked Clare. "There was a short paragraph about your grandfather in today's Morning Times, just reporting the facts." "They may not have anyone out here. They may just have picked it up from Reuters or one of the other news agencies," said Clare. Possible," agreed Kevin. "But keep your eyes and ears open for anyone else asking questions. I want to be first on this story." "OK. Is that it for now?" asked Clare. "Yep. Send that story through now, will you? And ring me again over the weekend at the office. I'm on duty this weekend," said Kevin. By the time Clare had emailed her article, she'd already decided her next line of approach on the Ulrich Grunwalder question. Bruno. He was a mountain guide. He must surely know Ulrich Grunwalder. Maybe she could get Bruno to fix a meeting with him. Or maybe he himself would know something about her grandfather's accident. In any case, she was going to have to tell him why she was in Zermatt if she wanted his help. She hoped this wouldn't change what was promising to be an interesting friendship. Chapter 15. With Bruno's Help. "Clare, just let the skis run across the ice. Don't fight it," called Bruno over his shoulder. They were skiing in a different place from yesterday, and Clare was not enjoying it. It was quite a bit steeper, and there was too much ice. Every time Clare tried to ski over it, she lost control. She felt like a beginner all over again. She fell on one particularly large area of ice and found herself sliding head first down the mountain. Both her skis had come off. "Swing your legs round," shouted Bruno. "Use your feet to stop yourself." She managed to stop when it became less steep, but lay there for a moment without moving. Looking up the mountain, she saw Bruno skiing down and carrying her skis.
You okay?" he asked. "That was quite a long fall."
"Yes, I'm fine," she replied, standing up slowly. Bruno helped her put her skis on again. "Let's not bother with this slope again. I don't want to kill myself just yet."
"Okay, we'll ski to the restaurant down there and have a drink. Then we'll go on some nice gentle slopes. Follow behind me."
Clare followed carefully behind Bruno. "I've never liked ice," said Clare. They were sitting at a table outside the restaurant.
"Nobody does, but you get used to it," replied Bruno.
Clare wasn't sure, but she thought that Bruno wasn't quite as open and friendly with her as he had been yesterday. He'd thanked her again for the previous evening and said what a good time he'd had, but somehow she felt he was more distant today. She hoped that what she was about to say was not going to cause a problem. "I'd like to ski on that run that goes near the bottom of the Matterhorn. We did it yesterday, do you remember?" asked Clare. "I want to remind myself of where my grandfather died."
"Fine," said Bruno, "but we'll have to go now. We have to go up on the cable car in order to get over to it, and that takes a bit of time."
Clare waited to see if he would mention her grandfather. Then she realized that, like the rest of the village, he knew who she was. "Did you know that the man they got out of the glacier this week was my grandfather?" asked Clare.
"Yes, of course." He smiled at her. "Everybody knows. It's not something that happens every day, you know. And you were identified as the granddaughter by the locals, probably from the minute you arrived."
"Why didn't you say something to me?" she asked.
"Why should I? If you wanted to talk about it, you would. So I assumed you didn't want to. Until now, that is."
"If you're so clever, you can tell me what I'm going to ask next, then," said Clare lightly.
"You're going to ask me if I know anything about your grandfather's accident, aren't you?"
"Yes. Do you?" she asked.
"Not very much," he replied carefully.
"And do you know Ulrich Grunwalder?" He nodded. "Do you think you could arrange for me to talk to him? I really would like to find out what he remembers. I met him briefly a couple of days ago, and I got the feeling he recognized the name of Edward Crowe, but I didn't have time to ask him any details." Clare crossed her fingers secretly, hoping that Bruno would agree.
"I don't know if he'll remember very much. He's a very old man now. But I can find out," said Bruno, standing up. "Now, come on, let's get on the cable car. That is, if you really want to ski the Matterhorn run."
"Yes, I do, honestly," said Clare with a smile. It wasn't just a way of introducing Edward Crowe into the conversation. About half an hour later, they stood in the shadow of the Matterhorn. Bruno pointed out the hut which the climbers stayed in overnight before setting out to climb to the top of the mountain in the early mornings. "You can walk up to there quite easily in the summer," said Bruno. "Look, there's the path. Can you see the rope at the side?" Bruno stood behind her and pointed. "Do you think Grandpa Edward stayed in that hut in 1924? "Possibly," replied Bruno. "It was certainly there then." Bruno looked up at the magnificent mountain. "What are you thinking?" asked Clare. "Just what a magical mountain it is. It must be one of the most photographed places in the world. You see it on every box of Swiss chocolates and on every souvenir from Zermatt, but I never tire of looking at it." "How many times have you climbed it?" asked Clare. "About 25, I guess, to the top, and a few unsuccessful climbs too." Bruno paused. "It almost looks a friendly mountain in this light, doesn't it?" Replied Clare. He had put his arms around her from behind. "It isn't. It can be a very cruel place sometimes." "Come on," he said suddenly. "Let's go. It's getting late. We don't want to miss the last lift down to the village." The electric taxi stopped outside her hotel. She got out stiffly. Her left side felt painful as a result of the fall. Bruno leaned out of the window. "I'll ring you later, when I've talked to him," he said. Clare didn't need to ask who him was. She was just pleased that he'd remembered, without her having to ask him again. "That'll be great," she said. "Thanks." She put her skis away in the ski room and took off her boots. Oh, what a wonderful moment that was. Ski boots were such big, unnatural things to wear on your feet. But it was almost worth it for the pleasure of taking them off at the end of the day. In her room, she got undressed and was admiring some large purple bruises from her fall all down her left side, when the phone rang. "Hi, it's me," said Bruno. "Herr Grunwalder has agreed to meet you tomorrow, but I'd like to see you tonight. I need to tell you about something." His voice sounded worried. "What's wrong?" asked Clare. "Nothing. Well, I don't know. I'll see you later." Clare felt she was getting mixed messages from Bruno. One minute he was obviously attracted to her, the next he seemed to be putting a distance between them. What was going on? She didn't need this right now. Chapter 16. Bruno's Story. The long hot bath hadn't particularly helped Clare's bruised body. She was still moving very carefully when she walked into the Monte Rosa later that evening. Bruno was standing at the bar talking to some other men, but broke away when she came in. "Oh, I feel my age tonight," said Clare, after they'd sat down together. "You don't look it," replied Bruno smoothly. "Your face is full of colour from being in the sun all day." "More like on fire," laughed Clare, touching her burning cheeks. "Anyway, how did you get on with Herr Grunwalder? Was he really willing to talk to me?" "He's agreed to, yes." "And did you explain who I am? I mean, about being Edward Crowe's granddaughter?" "He knew," replied Bruno with a small smile. "Like I said, everybody here knows who you are. All those men at the bar know who you are, and they're probably wondering why I'm talking to you too." "What do you mean? Is there something wrong with me? Or is it because I'm a journalist and they don't want me to find out something? Or do they think it's ridiculous, this relationship we're having?" Clare was beginning to get angry. She didn't like the idea that people were making judgments about her when they didn't even know her. Bruno squeezed her arm gently. "It's more to do with me than with you, really. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. First of all, I have to tell you that I'm Ulrich Grunwalder's grandson." "Aha. So that's how you were able to fix a meeting for me with him," said Clare. "Well, actually, I don't think my grandfather should talk to you, but I had to give him the opportunity if he wanted to." Bruno talked quietly to Clare. He told her that his grandfather had indeed been the climbing guide for Edward Crowe and Gordon Younger on their last expedition. He also said that throughout his life he'd always felt that there was something strange about this expedition. At first he'd thought that maybe his grandfather was to blame in some way for the deaths of the 2 English climbers, but nobody in the village seemed to believe this. And his grandfather had always said that it was a normal accident, sad deaths, but it was a chance all climbers accepted. On the occasions when the name of Edward Crowe had been mentioned, either at home or in the village, there had been an uncomfortable silence, sometimes a look, sometimes a change of subject, always something that had made Bruno curious. Obviously it hasn't been a major subject of conversation for years, but it's always been there, in the background. Until this month, that is, with Mr. Crowe's body reappearing. Bruno paused. "My grandfather has been very upset by the news. He's very disturbed, and I don't like to see him like this. He's a very old man. He should be at peace at the end of his life, not troubled." Clare was beginning to understand why Bruno had seemed confused in his relationship with her in the last few days. "But he wants to talk to me," repeated Clare. "I don't know if 'wants' is the right word. Maybe 'needs' or something else." Bruno looked troubled. "I don't know if I've done the right thing, telling him you wanted to meet him. Maybe I should have just left everything as it was." "It's his decision," replied Clare. "He doesn't have to tell me anything he doesn't want to, does he?" "No, but once or twice in the last week he's tried to say things and then stopped. So I think he wants to talk about it." Bruno looked directly at Clare. "Maybe you are the right person for him to say it to." "I hope so." "We'll see tomorrow," said Clare. She and Bruno chatted for a little while longer about nothing in particular, but she could see that his mind was occupied somewhere else. "I think I'll go back to the hotel for an early night, if you don't mind," she said. "See if a good night's sleep will get rid of this stiffness." Bruno walked with her to the front door of the hotel. He suggested picking her up at the hotel at 11 the following morning and taking her to see his grandfather. "He lives in the family house. My parents live there too, but they will be out tomorrow morning, so it'll be easier." Bruno was obviously so anxious about the meeting that Clare felt quite motherly towards him. "Don't worry. I'm sure it'll be okay tomorrow." She gave him a quick hug. He kissed her hard and then walked off, leaving her standing outside the hotel door. Neither of them noticed Ulrich Grunwalder coming up the street. Chapter 17. Love Story. Zermatt, July 1924. Ulrich watched as Edward bent down to kiss Marianne. He was shocked that they were so open about their feelings. And yet Marianne, his much-loved sister, looked so happy. Since Edward Crowe had arrived back in Zermatt at the beginning of the summer, Ulrich had seen Marianne open up like a flower in the sun. From the time he'd learnt about her feelings towards Edward, Ulrich had tried to get Marianne to see how impossible it all was. Edward was married. He was English. He was from another world and another class. He couldn't possibly love Marianne. She was fooling herself, and would cause a scandal for their family and the village if she continued in this way. But Edward had told Marianne of his love for her, and she believed him. Throughout that winter, Ulrich had been unable to persuade her to give up the idea of Edward coming back as a divorced man, ready to marry her. "It's ridiculous, Marianne," said Ulrich many times. "These things just don't happen. You are going to be very hurt." But Marianne had just smiled and waited. Ulrich himself got married in February to Greta, a local girl, and left the business of talking sense into Marianne to their mother. At the beginning of May, Edward returned, alone, to Zermatt. The relationship between the two of them grew. Ulrich was sure that people in the village knew what was going on, but nobody said anything to him. And he hadn't said anything yet to Edward, even though they had met several times. Edward never seemed embarrassed at seeing Ulrich. He even talked about climbing the Matterhorn together in a few weeks' time. And Ulrich, despite everything, was excited at the possibility. As the weeks passed, Marianne and Edward were seen together in public more, walking down the main street, occasionally taking tea in a small cafe. Ulrich learnt from his mother that Edward was not yet divorced, but according to Marianne, it was only a matter of time. And now news of the affair started to reach his ears. He learnt that, not surprisingly, most of the people in the village didn't like his sister's behaviour. And the locals thought that Edward Crowe was embarrassing himself and an old Zermatt family. His mother begged him to tell Edward to leave Zermatt. She knew that Marianne would be heartbroken, but this man would cause more trouble if he stayed. "I will, Mama," said Ulrich. Next week when we climb on the Matterhorn. It will be easier to talk to him when we are alone. At 11 the next morning, Bruno and Clare entered Ulrich Grunwalder's house rather nervously, both wondering what was going to be said. Bruno had asked Clare to be patient. He's old, remember. His mind is still good, but he does wander off the subject sometimes. Don't hurry him. He'll get to the point eventually, if he wants to. The old man was sitting at the table in the kitchen, looking straight ahead. "Grandfather, this is Clare Newton. Do you remember?" said Bruno, in what Clare assumed was a local language, a dialect, as it sounded very different from the German she knew.
"Yes,"
he replied. Clare shook his hand and sat down across the table from him. Neither of them mentioned the fact that they'd met a few days before. "Does he want to talk in German?" she whispered to Bruno. "I might need you to help if he does."
"I will speak English, and Bruno, you will stay with us. Now, madame, what do you want to know?"
Herr Grunwalder's voice sounded quite firm and clear. "I would like to know how my grandfather died," said Clare simply.
"He fell off the Matterhorn, and he pulled his friend with him. They both died. It was an accident, but there are always accidents in the mountains."
Ulrich Grunwalder stopped. "The other man, Gordon Younger, was a friend of his, you say?"
"They certainly knew each other well. I remember they talked a lot together."
"Where on the mountain did the accident happen?" asked Clare. "Were you still on your way up or coming down?"
"We had reached the top. We were all very delighted, especially Herr Crowe. Have you been up to the top, madame? No? No, of course you haven't. It is magnificent. I have been to the top many times. The last time, with Bruno."
Herr Grunwalder smiled at Bruno and held his hand.
"Now I am not able to any more. It is finished for me," he said with a deep sigh.
Nothing was said around the table for a few minutes. Clare realized she would have to gently remind him. "So you were on your way down, then?" No answer. Clare repeated the question.
"Yes, we were coming down. The Englishmen were tired, so we were going slowly. We were all roped together. We decided that only one man would move at a time, and that each man must secure the rope between each move. I was in front, then Edward Crowe, and then Herr Younger."
Clare got the feeling that he had told this part of the story many times before. It was coming out very smoothly. He continued,
"I moved forward, secured the rope, and turned round to watch the next man. I was surprised to see that they were both standing together. Herr Younger had moved forward when it was not his turn. I started to shout something, but just then—"
Herr Grunwalder's hand started shaking.
"Just then, your grandfather lost his footing, and he fell, and then Herr Younger fell too. He didn't have time to secure the rope, you see."
"And you, Herr Grunwalder?" asked Clare. "How did you manage to stop yourself falling too?"
"The rope. I had secured my rope, but it broke. The weight of the two bodies hanging. The rope broke, and they fell to their deaths."
His voice was very quiet now.
"There was nothing I could do. They disappeared from my view."
Clare could imagine the horror he must have felt at the time. He would have had to climb down with just his thoughts for company, and then face everyone in the village when he returned without his clients. He would have had to explain over and over again what had happened. Some people might even have believed that Herr Grunwalder had been responsible in some way. She was sure that his name as a good guide would have suffered, maybe not with the villagers, but certainly with the foreign climbers who might have seen him as an unlucky guide. "Gordon Younger is buried in the cemetery here," said Clare. "How was it possible that his body was recovered, but not my grandfather's?" Herr Grunwalder pulled a large handkerchief out of his jacket pocket and blew his nose. He slowly raised himself from his chair, and with the help of Bruno, walked out of the room. "He'll be back soon," said Bruno on his return. "He just wanted to get out for a minute. It's upsetting for him to remember. Your grandfather and his friend were the only two climbers he lost in his whole career." "That's what I wanted to know, Bruno," said Clare quickly. "Did he have a problem guiding again? I mean, did climbers still trust him and want to hire him?" "Well, he told me that he chose not to climb again for 1 year, not as a guide, not by himself, nothing. Then he started again, and became the best, by far the most popular and successful guide for about 40 years. He's an amazing man. He's always been very special for me." Ulrich Grunwalder came back into the room.
"The next day," he said, "I went up with a group of men from the village to see if we could find the bodies. Herr Younger was on the glacier. The rope had caught round a rock, and Herr Crowe was hanging down in a crevasse in the glacier. They tried to pull Herr Crowe up, but the rope broke again, and he fell. We carried the other one down to the village. They had fallen about 1,000 meters.
"Herr Grunwalder, did you know my grandfather? I mean, apart from as a climber?" asked Clare. "He had been in Zermatt a few times, and I believe that summer he was here for quite a while." There was no answer from the old man, so Clare decided she'd better be direct. "My family have got 2 letters from him to my grandmother, written from Zermatt during that summer. They said very strong things, mainly that he was going to stay in Zermatt and never return to his family." Ulrich Grunwalder moved nervously in his chair, and his handkerchief came out again. "Is there something you are not telling me, Herr Grunwalder?" asked Clare quietly. "Ever since I first arrived in Zermatt, I've had the feeling that there is some sort of secret about my grandfather's death. Nobody wanted to tell me that you were his guide, for example. Why not?"
"Madame, I will tell you why. I know it is time to speak, but it is a sad story for your family and for mine. It all happened so long ago, and times have changed. It probably wouldn't be the same today. I don't know."
Herr Grunwalder leant forward and began,
"Your grandfather was in love with my sister Marianne. He came back to Zermatt in 1924 to be with her."
There was a noise from Bruno's direction. Clare looked at him and realized that this was news to him too. Herr Grunwalder continued. His voice was almost a whisper now.
"It was not good. He was a married man. He'd been here with his wife and daughter. Everybody knew them. Then he came back alone. It was a scandal. I don't know if you can understand that. But this was 1924. It was not like today. Marianne loved him, and I believe he loved her, but Marianne never forgot him."
"Is she still alive?" asked Clare. "No," replied Bruno. "She died about 20 years ago." He turned to his grandfather. "So that's why Aunt Marianne never married," said Bruno. She was the only unmarried person I knew when I was a child. I thought she was very strange."
"She was always good to you, Bruno," said Herr Grunwalder sharply.
"So," interrupted Clare, "you went climbing with this man who had brought shame to your family and—"
"Do not continue, madame. You think I killed him because of my sister. I did not. I liked him, even if I didn't like what he was doing. But it is true that some people in the village thought that his death was the best way out for everyone. Except Marianne, of course."
There was a tear in the corner of his eye.
"Poor Marianne. She also thought I had killed him at first."
"So, what really happened up there?" asked Clare, impatient to get to the truth.
"There was someone else up there, remember? Not just us two," said Herr Grunwalder.
"Gordon Younger?" said Clare in amazement. "Why should he want to kill my grandfather?"
"At first, your grandfather seemed happy that Herr Younger was with us. He introduced him to me as a climbing friend from his hometown. But the first night, when we were in the climbing hut, they had a big argument."
"What about?" asked Bruno. Clare jumped at the sound of his voice. She'd almost forgotten he was there.
"Your grandmother, madame, had asked Herr Younger to come and persuade Edward Crowe to return home to her."
"And if he refused, he was supposed to kill him?" said Clare. "You mean my grandmother hired someone to kill him? It sounds too much like a Hollywood film to be true."
"No, I do not think she said this to him," said Herr Grunwalder, shaking his head. "The story is not yet finished. It was clear that Herr Younger did not really want your grandfather to return. I remember Herr Crowe suddenly laughing, and then he said, 'Good God, Gordon, you're in love with Agatha, aren't you?'"
"And who did grandmother love, I wonder? Edward or Gordon?" Clare said quietly. Herr Grunwalder answered,
"I believe she loved your grandfather. Herr Younger said so. He was very sad."
"So, after all this high drama, you still decided to climb the next day?" asked Clare.
"Yes, the next morning they both seemed calm, and they both wanted to go for the top," continued Herr Grunwalder. "We climbed quite quickly. There was not much conversation between us. Herr Younger particularly was in his own world. The only time he said anything was when we got to the top. On the way down, well, you know what happened."
"You said before that when you turned round, you saw them standing together, which they shouldn't have been," said Clare. "Are you telling me that Gordon Younger deliberately climbed down to my grandfather to push him off the mountain, to kill him?"
"I don't know. Certainly there was some contact between them, but I do not know if he really wanted to push him or if he lost his balance and fell. Nobody will ever know for sure."
No one spoke for a moment. Then Clare said, "Well, it's an amazing story. A love story, really, isn't it? With a tragic end." "It is a story that has lived in this house with my family for a long time," said Bruno, as he reached out to take his grandfather's hand. "I know this village and its people. I can understand why it is easier for them not to remember the past, and not want you to bring it up again, Clare." "Yes, I can understand it too," she said, hoping that they didn't think that for her it was just a love story. In fact, she found it all very moving and disturbing. She wanted to go away and consider all this new family history.
"I have not told anybody before about Gordon Younger and what happened on the mountain," said Herr Grunwalder. "It was not important at the time. It is perhaps only important for you to know, madame.
He looked very tired as he sat back in his chair. "Thank you for telling me," Clare said. "Next week will be the final part of the story, when I go back to England with my grandfather's body. There will be no need to remember Edward Crowe or Gordon Younger or me any more. It will all be over."
"Yes, I believe it will," replied Herr Grunwalder,
and he smiled at her. Chapter 18. Shared Experiences. Clare sat in her room with a strong gin and tonic, thinking about her family. There was Grandmother Agatha, so proud of her tragically killed young husband, never letting anyone suspect that he had left her for another woman, and her own mother who knew nothing of her parents' romantic lives. And then suddenly she started to cry. For about 10 minutes she cried like a baby. She thought of all the sadness and some of the happiness that surrounded her grandfather. He'd been brave to come to Zermatt to be with Marianne. Surely it would have been easier just to carry on with his normal middle-class life at home. But then maybe he was the sort of person who couldn't live a lie, the sort of person who had to be true to his real self. Clare's crying increased. She couldn't help comparing herself with her grandfather. She hadn't been true to her real self, whatever that was, for ages. Her search for knowledge about her grandfather had in some way been a desperate search for her own identity. Well, she hadn't found it. She felt lost, and she didn't like it. Eventually, she stopped crying. In the bathroom, she washed her face and hoped she was washing away all the self-pity too. She had to ring Andrew to tell him about Grandfather and Marianne. At the end of Clare's explanation, Andrew said, "One thing I don't understand is why Grandma Agatha kept those 2 letters from Edward. She spent all her life denying the truth, but those letters destroyed her story. Maybe she actually wanted people to find out after her death." "Oh, maybe. Who knows?" replied Clare. "How do you feel about it all, Andrew?" "Bit sad. So many damaged lives." "Nothing new about that," said Clare bitterly. "Anyway, do you think we should tell Mum?" "Yes, I think we should. There have been so many secrets already about all this. I don't think we should have any more," said Andrew. "I wonder if the name Gordon Younger means anything to her, or if she has any memory of a Marianne and Ulrich. She was only about 3 years old. She might remember horses in the street, but not people, surely." "You okay, Clare?" asked Andrew. "You sound tired." "Yeah, I'm fine. A bit sad, but okay. Anyway, look, I've made arrangements for Grandfather to be delivered to Cooper's funeral home late on Monday, and you say you'll get a service or something organised for Wednesday, so—" "I know what you're going to say now," interrupted Andrew. "You're going to say you won't be coming up with Grandfather on Monday because you have to go into your office. That's right, isn't it?" "Yes, you know me too well," replied Clare. "Well, just remember what we talked about before. No wild stories, please. It's going to be difficult to keep it simple, but think of Mum reading it," said Andrew firmly. Yes, I'll remember," said Clare quickly, not wanting to talk any more about that. She hadn't decided yet how she was going to write this story for Kevin. They said their goodbyes. Clare spent the afternoon on her balcony with the laptop. She started to put down some ideas for her article. It was such a good story to tell. It had everything: love, jealousy, danger, secrets, death, and 2 endings, separated by 70 years. She was still playing with her ideas when there was a knock at her door. It was Bruno. "Come in," she said. "I'm glad to see you. How's your grandfather?" "He's okay. A bit quiet, I suppose," replied Bruno, and he bent down to kiss her on the cheek. Gone out for his usual walk. It was an amazing story, wasn't it? I didn't know anything about Aunt Marianne and your grandfather, you know. I realized that, said Clare, handing him a beer. It must have been really hard for her, and I'm sure there were people in Zermatt who would not let her forget the scandal she had created. Poor Marianne. Clare closed the laptop. She didn't want Bruno to see what she'd been writing. Thank you for helping me. I hope it wasn't too painful for you to hear. No, not really. I'm glad I know everything, said Bruno. My only worry now is how much to tell my parents. Apparently, according to Grandfather, they don't know about Marianne and Edward. I asked him after you left. Aha, another thing between your family and mine, said Clare. My mother doesn't know anything about it either. My brother Andrew is going to tell her. Yeah, it's strange the way our family stories keep running into each other. Marianne and Edward, and now you and me. Bruno looked at her. Yeah, of all the ski instructors in all Zermatt, I had to get you, Clare laughed. That's lucky. Unless, of course... Okay, I admit it, said Bruno. When I knew who it was who wanted private lessons, I was curious. I wanted to know what sort of person you were. I also wanted to know something about your family, in the same way as you wanted to know about mine. And was that the reason you suggested our evening drinks too? Curiosity about my family? Clare was not happy at the thought that she had been used. No, curiosity about you. I like you as you, not because of all this business, said Bruno directly. But somehow the family connection makes our friendship feel even better. No, not better, more right, more natural, more... Better, said Clare. Okay, better then. Do you know what I mean? Asked Bruno. Yes, we have a lot in common, agreed Clare, not sure where this conversation was leading. Look, tomorrow's your last day. Have you got anything on? Would you like to go for a walk out of Zermatt, away from all this grandfather business for a bit? Yes, I'd love to get away from everything, said Clare warmly. Okay, I'll pick you up about 10 tomorrow morning, said Bruno, as he walked towards the door. Oh, by the way, you don't want to do anything tonight, do you? Yes, but no. That is, I'd like to, but I've got rather a lot to do, said Clare, waving a hand in the direction of the laptop. Even though she enjoyed Bruno's company, she felt she needed her own space this evening. After he'd gone, she lay on the bed intending to let her mind wander over the morning's events, but Bruno kept appearing. She began to wonder if there really was something between them, something that might continue after next week. Or was she just trying to fill an empty space in her life? Well, they obviously both found each other interesting, and there was definitely a bit of sexual chemistry too. Maybe tomorrow would be a good day. Chapter 19. The Summer Place. Do you think Edward and Marianne ever came this way? Asked Clare, as they walked along a path at the side of the valley. Quite possible, replied Bruno. This leads up to the fields where our family used to live in the summer, and I know Aunt Marianne loved it up there. Is that where we're going, then? Well, we'll go past it, but we're going further on, further into that valley. Bruno pointed to somewhere in the distance. Clare walked on with a steady rhythm. They were well away from Zermatt now, and the air was very clean. It was a warm April morning. Nature was enjoying the spring sunshine, and Clare was in love, not with Bruno, but with the landscape. She wanted to breathe in all the beauty and keep it there. The contrast to London was too much for her to think about. She'd worked late the night before on her article. She'd decided to write it more or less as it was, as a slice of her family history, and as a reminder of how society used to be. She hadn't named Gordon Younger or the Grunwalder family. A local guide and a local girl seemed enough. But her family were in the article. There was no way round that. She had written the whole story very simply, without unnecessary detail, and felt pleased with it. It was a powerful piece. Now, with that behind her, she was able to enjoy the day. The path climbed steadily across land that until recently had been covered in snow. The flowers that had been waiting under the frozen ground for months were beginning to appear, and the birds had woken up to the fact that with the arrival of spring they had to get busy. "It's a brilliant time of year," said Bruno, "full of energy and new life. Makes you glad to be alive, doesn't it?" He stopped on the path and put his arms round her. She was lifted up and turned round. "Stop!" she laughed. "My head's going round." He put her down. "Oh, nobody's done that to me since I was about 8, she said breathlessly. "No, well, it's not something I do every day." Bruno was still holding her. "I'm in a strange mood today. I don't know, a sort of weight has been lifted." "Your grandfather probably feels the same," she said. "Yes, I think he does. He looked peaceful this morning when I left." He gave her a kiss on the nose and said, "Come on, I'll show you the family summer place." They left the path and climbed up the green hillside. Bruno took her hand and pulled her up the last bit. They stood with their backs to the wooden house, looking down into the valley. "I could live here," said Clare. "The view is incredible." "A bit far from the supermarket, but it is wonderful, isn't it?" "Does it still belong to your family?" asked Clare. "Yeah, but we don't use it very much," replied Bruno. "We come up here for picnics during the summer sometimes. That's about it now." "Let's not walk on any further," said Clare. "Can we just spend the rest of the day here? It's so perfect." So they did. They lay on the grass outside, sometimes talking, sometimes not. They got to know a lot more about each other's lives and each other's families. They shared divorce experiences, and she could feel Bruno's sadness when he talked about his children. She discovered that he very rarely saw them. They had gone with their mother to Canada after the marriage broke up. "I'm going to miss you next week," he said. She thought about saying something amusing, like how he would be grateful to get his normal life back without some Englishwoman bringing up old memories, but she didn't want to play games. "Me too," she said, and meant it. When they kissed this time, it was different. Clare loved the softness of his lips and the way he stopped to look at her. She loved the feelings that it produced in her. "That was nice," said Bruno, touching her cheek. "Certainly was," she agreed. Neither of them quite knew what to say next. "How do you feel about long-distance relationships?" he asked. "I don't know. I've never had one." "Have you?" she replied. "Not really. But I don't want tomorrow to be the end of us." "No, nor me." They lay there holding hands. Clare said, "I saw this film once when the man and the woman, who were both married to different people, met once a year for a weekend of love and then went back to their normal lives. I remember thinking how exciting that sounded." Bruno laughed and rolled over to look at her. "Sounds wonderful, but I think I'd like it more than once a year." "Agreed. But we're not kids anymore. We don't need a 24 hours a day sort of relationship, do we?" said Clare. "I wouldn't mind one 24 hours now," said Bruno, kissing her ear. Clare was still not 100% sure about a new relationship. And to make love, knowing that she had to leave the following day, was just not her way. She tried to explain this to Bruno, and he accepted it without problem. Once I've got everything sorted out back home, we can see how we feel. Maybe you'd like to come over to London and stay with me, suggested Clare. We can take it from there.
That sounds very sensible, Clare. Very adult, said Bruno, laughing.
Later, on the way back to Zermatt, they chatted easily together, but Clare could feel that the nearer they got to the village, the more the outside world began to take over. Bruno could feel her silence.
Difficult, isn't it? Your body's here, but half your mind is somewhere else.
This man was getting good at reading her. Yes, sorry, she said. And I've had such a perfect day, too.
If it makes it any easier, I think we should say goodbye when we get to your hotel, replied Bruno. We could meet tonight, but it couldn't be any better than it was today. And you need to think about London things.
Are you always this sensitive to other people's needs? She asked, with a suggestion of surprise in her voice.
Probably not, he said cheerfully, but I'm getting better, obviously.
Back at the Zermatterhof, Bruno came up to her room with her. Neither of them wanted to say goodbye in a public place. When they got upstairs, they did the easy things first. They gave each other their addresses and telephone numbers, and made promises to be in touch on Monday evening. Then they stood and looked at each other.
I can't believe I've only just met you, said Clare.
I feel I know you so well.
I haven't told you everything, you know. Still some things to discover when I come to London. You were serious about that suggestion, weren't you? Said Bruno a little anxiously.
Yes, said Clare, and then waited to see if there was a little voice in her head saying, but... Nothing happened. Yes, she said again. I'd really like you to come.
Bye then. For now, special person.
They had a long, sexy kiss, which could easily have made them forget their sensible decisions.
Let's make that London visit sooner, rather than later.
Yes, please, she said. She felt sad and happy as she closed the door behind him. She really did like him. He was going to come to London. There was something good to look forward to. She made herself ring Kevin. He was keen to have her finish story as soon as possible.
Send it to me now, babe, if you've written it, said Kevin.
There are still 1 or 2 bits I'm playing with. I'll email it in the morning before I leave, if you really can't wait. And listen, Kevin, I don't want you to change a bloody word of that article. It's my story, and it's good.
Course I won't change anything, darling, said Kevin automatically. You know how I feel about your writing. You're the best.
Yuck, thought Clare. He really is a horrible little man. I'm being serious, Kevin. Change anything and there'll be trouble.
I heard you the first time. No need to threaten me, said Kevin coldly. Just send it, will you?
Chapter 20. The News Breaks. Clare left Zermatt early the next morning. At the train station, she couldn't help looking around to see if Bruno was there, but he wasn't. As the train went slowly down the valley to Tesch, she looked at the Matterhorn for the last time. She felt close to tears as it disappeared from sight. The journey home was quiet. Everything went smoothly, and at Heathrow Airport, she watched as her grandfather's body was moved to the funeral car for the journey north. Kevin's photographer was there to catch it all on film. She was sorry that her grandfather was going to be buried in the Lake District beside Grandma Agatha. Really, he should have been buried in Zermatt, his real home. Grandma got her wish after all, she thought. He's coming back to her after all this time. When she got back to her house, she wandered around, touching various familiar things and trying to feel back at home. But she felt flat. The phone rang, but it was only Andrew checking that everything had gone okay. She made 1 or 2 other phone calls to friends and caught up with their news. Then she rang Bruno. It was picked up at the other end almost immediately. "Oh, that was quick," laughed Clare. "Were you sitting there waiting for it to ring?" "No, I was just about to ring you." Clare was happy to hear his warm, friendly voice, but it was odd talking to him on the phone. "It's more difficult talking on the phone," Bruno said. "I can't see you." Clare laughed. "You've done it again. You've just said exactly what I was thinking. You're incredible." "Thank you." They talked for a little longer without really saying very much, but it didn't matter. The unspoken bits were the most important. There was definitely a current of excitement on the line. After Clare had put the phone down, she felt better. It was clear that Bruno was important to her. He wasn't just somebody who had been part of the magic of those few days in Zermatt. "Thank God," she thought. "I'm too old for a holiday romance." She was woken the next morning by the sound of the newspaper being pushed through the letterbox. 7 o'clock. Time for a cup of tea and a read of the paper in bed. "I'll wait until the rush hour is over before I head off up north," she thought. She picked up the copy of the Daily News and went into the kitchen. Immediately she turned to her article on page 5. The headline over a full-page article screamed, "Was he pushed or did he fall?" "Oh, no!" she cried. "That wasn't what she'd written. What the hell had Kevin done?" She sat down and, with growing anger, read the whole article. Instead of her gentle story of tragic love, the article had become a murder mystery, with Grandma Agatha seen as the jealous, rejected wife. At first Clare couldn't believe it. She'd told Kevin not to change anything, and even if he personally hadn't rewritten it, he was still the editor, still the one in charge with a final say. He could have stopped it if he'd wanted. Then the doubts began. Had she known deep down that he would do something like this? And had she chosen to ignore those feelings? She'd written the article, and although a lot of the words had been cut or changed, she was still the guilty one. She should never have let herself be pushed into writing it. The article, as it had come out, was just another example of how low the Daily News had sunk, and how low she'd sunk too. She picked up the phone, pressed Kevin's numbers with hatred, and waited. As soon as he answered, she said, "You're a complete bastard, Kevin. I resign," and put the phone down hard. Clare walked around the house trying to work things out in her mind. She found a packet of cigarettes in the sitting room that someone must have left, and without thinking, lit one. A couple of puffs, and she put it out in disgust. Should she ring Andrew or her mother and warn them about the article? No, perhaps better to explain it all face to face. Oh, God, she could see the hurt look on her mother's face now. The phone rang, but she ignored it. Probably Kevin with some smooth excuse. She switched off her mobile in case he tried that number, and went upstairs to have a shower. The hot water poured over her, but it didn't wash away the anger she felt towards Kevin, the newspaper, and herself. She'd been a blind fool, trying to pretend that she still had control over her work. But her kind of journalism had gone. Big business had taken over, and she was glad she was out of it, glad not to be employed by those bastards any more. The drive up to her mother's gave her some thinking time. She thought about her future and the need for her to get control again over her professional life. But most of all she thought about her family. The nearer she got to the Lake District, the more nervous she became about facing them. She took a deep breath as she let herself into the house. Her mother and Andrew were watching TV.
"Oh, Clare," said her mother as soon as she saw her. "How could you?"
And her eyes filled with tears. Clare sat down and put her arms round her mother.
"I'm sorry, Mum,"
she said, and found that she was crying too. Andrew sat there in cold silence.
"I've resigned from the paper," Clare said. "I know it's too late, but anyway, that's what I've done."
Then she told them how she'd originally written the article.
"I told you to be careful with Kevin," said Andrew. "The whole thing is disgusting. My opinion of newspapers and the people who work for them was right. They've got no normal human feelings at all. I could go on, but what's the point?"
Clare knew what journalism could be like, and she accepted that Andrew and her mother had every right to be angry and hurt. She was too. Later that evening, when everybody had said what they needed to say, the three of them were able to talk a little about Edward Crowe's life and death. There were several questions that Clare would have liked to ask her mother about Grandma Agatha, but she thought it better not to. It could wait. By 10 o'clock, they had exhausted themselves. No more anger about the article, no more questions, no more to talk about. They went to bed. Chapter 21. Burying Edward. The service for Edward Crowe was simple and private. Secretly, Clare had been worried that the Daily News might have sent a reporter or photographer, but luckily only the three of them were there. They buried him in the family grave, next to the wife he had left. It was not a particularly sad occasion, as Edward had never been part of their lives, except as a memory. As they left the cemetery, a woman approached them. Clare immediately thought, reporter.
"I'm from the Lake District Gazette. Could I just ask you a few questions about Albert Crowe?" said the woman.
"Edward Crowe," said Andrew angrily. "At least get your facts right."
"Sorry," said Clare at the same time.
"We're not answering any questions." The three of them got into Clare's car, and she drove off quickly.
"Why can't they leave us alone?" asked her mother in a shaky voice.
"They will, Mum," said Andrew. "It'll be old news by tomorrow, don't you worry."
"He's right, Mum," said Clare. "Just forget it."
Before Andrew left to drive back to his own home, Clare managed to talk to him on his own for about 10 minutes. She wanted to know whether he was still very angry with her. She hated the idea of losing her brother's friendship. He was angry, but not really with her. He could see how shaken she was by what had happened. "What'll you do now?" he asked. "Do you want to come and stay with us until you've worked out your next move?" "That's a lovely offer, Andrew, thanks," she replied. "But I need to go back to London. For a start, I've got an interview with Cherry Gaskell arranged for Friday. It's important, you know, my first job away from the Daily News."
"Take care, Clare," said Andrew anxiously. "Don't sell yourself to the first person who wants to buy. Remember, you're a writer, not a journalist."
"You're right," she said, giving him a big kiss. "Thanks for reminding me, my lovely, sensible brother." Clare decided to stay on overnight. Her mother obviously didn't want to be alone, and Clare was happy to have the chance to repair their relationship. After breakfast the next morning, Clare drove back to London. She planned to go straight to the office. She knew that Kevin would not be there at that time, and she wanted to collect some personal things from her desk. Then she'd come home, have a glass of wine, and phone Bruno. She'd missed speaking to him over the last couple of days. Maybe they could fix a definite date for his visit. It didn't have to be next week, but it would be lovely to fix it for a few weeks' time. Then she'd have something to look forward to. But she didn't have time to phone Bruno. He phoned her.
"You won't believe this, Bruno, but I was just going to ring you," she said.
realizing the current of excitement running through her. "I'm reading your mind again," Bruno joked. They laughed, and all the anger she had been feeling